Hey, before I kick off the podcast, I just want to shout out Next Door Clothing. Next Door, a clothing brand based out of Bondi in Sydney. They're making really nice jeans and shirts and hats. So go and check out their full range at nextdoorsydney.com. They're also artists, so you can go and check out a range of art. They put on rad parties, and I love what they're doing. So nextdoorsydney.com for the full range. This is for Clementine and Otis.
I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Wadi Wadi people of the Darawal Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. This is, was and always will be Aboriginal land, and sovereignty was never ceded. Black Lives Matter.
Shout out to our sponsors today, Indosole. Use code THT at checkout and get yourself some timeless Indosole sandals. They are recycled motor vehicle tyres and they're made into footwear, guided by the B Corp ethical manufacturing certification that they have, which is established by the brand Patagonia. You can become a conscious consumer by visiting indosole.com. That's INDOSOLE.com. And that's worldwide. You'll be directed to the distributor in your region for fast delivery. Let's go. Terrible happy talks. Terrible happy talks.
Yeah, good to be here, man. Whoa. Bit on purpose.
Submissive donut later. 3, 2, 1. Alright, let's do this. Today's guest is Maneesha Todd. Maneesha is back on the show to check in for a chat about her lived experiences in relation to recent national and global events. And beyond that, we're just having a chat. Maneesha Todd, welcome.
Hello, how are you? Thanks for having me back.
Oh, I'm so stoked to have you back.
I love the new intro. That sounded so good.
You really think so?
Yeah, I was like grooving out in the chair.
I'm so glad because I put a lot of thought into it and I bounced it off different friends and got feedback, and it was like a 50-50 split. Like some people like keep the old one, some people like try the new one. And in the end I was like, you got to progress and just mix it up. So
yeah, try something new. Why not?
that was like, that might be the new intro for the next 100 episodes. Who knows?
I like it.
Thanks. I'm stoked. So how are you? Like what's, give me a breakdown of the last, let's say the last month of your life.
The last month of my life has been particularly hectic.
Why?
I've been working, so I work full time. I've also recently changed jobs, which was surprisingly emotional. That was last week, and I've been doing a lot of trips to Sydney, a lot of full weekends that I've spent in Sydney. I've been going to different protests. Sorry, some of them I've been attending, some of them I've been doing like human rights observing at. I've done a few different talks. I don't know, I've done trainings. It's a lot. It's hard to summarize actually.
So how's things going at Amnesty International? Are you still with them?
I am, yeah. So still with Amnesty, and it's been 1 week now into my new role. So it's not exactly a promotion. It's more just moving to a different area. So I'm actually in fundraising now.
Wow.
Which I think surprised some people because I do a lot of campaigns and activism stuff in my spare time. But I think if I also worked in that space, it would just be way too much.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd have the headspace or the time for that. And I was keen to learn new and different skills. So I'm in the acquisitions team basically, which is responsible for reaching new audiences and bringing on new financial donors, particularly regular donors. So I'll be able to do a lot in the digital space, on like Facebook and writing emails and doing training of different fundraisers and like a whole range of different stuff.
Yeah. So why'd that come about? Like, why did you feel like you needed the change? Because you were scared of burnout in the other role, or did they just bring it up and say, hey, you'd be good for this?
I definitely wasn't scared of burnout in the other role. It was probably the opposite. I had been there for like 2.5 years and was just ready for something else. I wasn't feeling very challenged and was looking to progress and learn new skills. Because I love my team. and I love the organization, but I didn't love like the role that I was doing.
Okay.
It was like an admin type role. So yeah, I was ready for something else.
Yeah, nice. So cool. So look, the reason I was really keen to have you back on the show, last time you were on, I got a lot of really nice feedback about, you as just a guest and as a person and as like a really inspired young person. And I agree, and also there's a lot of compliments on your voice, your radio voice. But what a lot of people were talking about was we touched on some delicate themes, especially around some of the work you do with Amnesty International, but also your volunteer work with Lifeline, which I think is such a crucial organisation to our society. How's that going? Are you still working with that or volunteering?
Yeah, I am still at Lifeline, just barely. I've only done 2 shifts this year and I'm supposed to be doing 1 a week.
Right.
Hopefully I can squeeze in that this weekend. But yeah, I really want to keep doing it because it's one of those things where sometimes I find it hard to fit in, and it's quite emotionally exhausting, and you really need to be in the right headspace because you never know what kind of call you're going to get, and you do need to be mentally prepared to potentially have like a really intense call. And if you're not prepared to have that, then you probably shouldn't do the shift because you never know. But always, so sometimes it can feel like a bit of a chore, which is unfortunate. But then whenever I do a shift, always afterwards, I'm so grateful that I've done it. And usually there'll be at least one or, a few conversations that I have where people tell me that they're really grateful that I answered the phone and thank me for my time. Not every call, some calls can be abusive. And
Really?
Yeah. There's sexual harassment calls too. There's a whole range of different things that we need to look out for.
Is this because we're dealing with people who are suffering from mental illness and they're using or capitalizing on the opportunity to maybe express frustration or like they're people who are sick people, really, aren't they? Like when that happens.
Yeah, they're seeking help in maybe not the best ways. It depends on what kind of call we're talking about. Like some people they might get frustrated when they want advice, for example, and you can't give advice. So there might be misunderstanding of what the service actually provides.
Gotcha.
Or they might want to talk for a really long time and you don't necessarily have the time. Sometimes people just call up and swear at you, and are abusive towards you. And, I can only assume they're obviously dealing with some difficult things in their life and they have some issues with, anger management or whatever. They're struggling to cope basically, but ultimately, especially because we are volunteers, it's not our job to sit on the phones and be abused. So we do have to put boundaries in place.
Yeah.
There's also a percentage of calls where people actually call up and masturbate.
Excuse me?
Am I allowed to say that?
You can say whatever you want, but really? How do you know they're doing that?
It's a really difficult thing to tell. You kind of just get a bit of a vibe. And like sometimes you can hear it and that's actually good. I'd rather hear it because then I know. Like they might, for example, say something like, "Oh, it's just so hard."
Okay.
And it's you just get a bit of a vibe. Sometimes you hear things and then I'll be able to be like, "What's that noise?" And they might just hang up. Like I think I've been lucky. Often I'll try and call them out and they hang up. But then sometimes it's like, "Look, I actually don't know." And the worst thing would be to hang up on someone when it was a genuine thing. Wow. So yeah, there's a whole range of different things, but I think whenever I do go, I always feel really glad that I've went. I feel like it's almost like a special power, having those skills. And now that I have this like special power, which is just basically the training that anyone could do, I think that if anyone could do the training and improve on their skills, and a lot of people could do Lifeline as well. It's not like I'm unique in that regard, but now that I have those skills, it's like, I feel like I should use them. And
Totally.
even if now my capacity is a lot lower, I'm still going to try and keep doing it, and basically until they call me out and be like, you're not meeting your obligations. And I'll deal with that conversation when it comes.
Yeah, I mean, listening to what you're saying, like it sounds like you're dealing with the full spectrum of our society. And look, there's the dark side of it. We have a dark side to our society, you know. But I just think what you're doing is you're being of service to our society. And for me personally, one thing I've learned in my life journey is that when you're being of service to someone or something, I kind of feel like that's where the good feelings are. You know? And like for personal happiness comes from that. And you've said it numerous times. You're like, I just feel so good afterwards, you know. And I think what a great way to live your life that way, you know, even though it would be very difficult sometimes by the sounds of things.
Yeah. It is. It is such a privilege though. Like, and I've had some.
So you see it as a privilege being able to speak to these people?
Yeah. Because you're speaking to people at their most vulnerable moments. And it is a privilege to really be there for someone, because a lot of those people, they don't talk to other people. That's why they're reaching out to us. So for them to have the strength and the courage to pick up the phone in their darkest moments and let someone in and talk about how they're going on, and I have the privilege to listen to that and to be there for them, and the responsibility actually as well, when I think about it, like to actually listen and validate their feelings and support them as best as I can, and within the realms of what Lifeline does. And I've had some beautiful moments. One of the a moment that stands out to me was when someone came out for the first time to me.
Wow.
So they'd never come out to anyone else before. Another person along similar lines is a trans woman but hasn't come out yet, and will call and I'm able to call her by her preferred pronouns, and they weep on the phone, or sexual violence and domestic violence survivors or people still going through that, having the ability to talk to them and empower them, and tell them that I believe them and that they are strong, and validate their experience. So, and you know, and obviously, also people who deal with suicidal thoughts, and it's difficult because there's a lot of irrational beliefs that you can have, and we need to be careful of that. Like, I think sometimes I want the call to end in a certain way because it makes me feel good, but it's also important for me to remember that it's not necessarily my job to actually make someone feel better, and it doesn't reflect on me as well. It reflects on where that person is at that time, as long as I'm following all the right the model and the guidelines and of what we can do. So you need to, I guess, be really self-aware about where you're at and challenge some of those irrational beliefs as well, because it can be hard if a call doesn't go like the way that you want it to, not take that on yourself.
But you're holding space for people.
Yeah.
Like, that's a skill, and that's exhausting as well, right?
Yeah.
Because like you're engaged with what they're saying, you know, you're very mindful of the concepts and the feelings they're having and then expressing to you, and you stay with them for how long sometimes on the phone?
I mean, it really depends on the call. Some can go up to an hour. That's probably the longest I've been, but that would only be if there were like serious safety issues.
Okay.
I mean, not necessarily. There's no real hard and fast rule, but I would say most calls are between 20 to 30 minutes if you're having like a full conversation. So yeah, and I think one of the biggest misconceptions, I thought that it was about giving advice. And I think prior to Lifeline, I thought that helping people was sitting down and fixing the problem and giving them advice. And that's, I think, a very natural and human thing. You know, you talk to someone, they tell you their problems and you're like, oh my gosh, I really want to fix it, and you want to help them and solve it together. But often that's not necessarily what that person needs, and it's not where your where your help can actually be provided. And that's been one of the biggest shifts for me at Lifeline now, understanding that it's not about giving advice. It's about actually listening and hearing them and validating their experience basically, and just saying, I hear you. I don't necessarily understand what you're going through, but it sounds like you're really going through a tough time. And just that actually helps people so much. And it surprises me how much just that alone can help people when you're not you don't even necessarily need to give a referral. Sometimes it's necessary, and if people want advice, that's great. But I think the key thing is differentiating whether it's solicited or unsolicited. So I always try now to ask, do you want it? In my personal life, I ask people, are you wanting my advice? Just so I can avoid giving it when it's not wanted.
You become a sounding board, and so effectively you're bouncing back their own ideas and their own thoughts, so then they can see their own ideas and thoughts from another party. And I find with me personally, when I do that, it actually changes the meaning of those thoughts that are in my head, and then someone bounces the exact same thing back to me, and then I go, oh, different perspective. Oh, okay. And then I learn from that. So you're helping the person, I guess it's on their own journey of self-discovery.
Yeah.
Because I sometimes believe that, like, I heard this saying once, and it was like thoughts and feelings aren't facts. And it's not a fact. It doesn't mean that because you're feeling a certain way or you're thinking something in your head doesn't actually mean it's true. And it's a really good point, like, because it's just a perspective on it. So you're giving another perspective on it. It's really cool.
Yeah.
But simple. And I love the point you made about how it's innately human to want to try and fix situations, And I know it's coming from a place of compassion and kindness, but it's not necessarily what the person wants. But they don't even realize it themselves, So,
yeah. And sometimes you can ask them what they want. I think sometimes people actually do know what they want, so you can ask them as well if you're not sure. And that's one of the things that we believe at Lifeline, is that people are the expert in their own lives. We don't necessarily know what's best for them and what they need, but we put it back on them and we help explore the options with them. But it should always be led by them, because any solution we give to them, they're not necessarily going to want to do, and they need to have ownership over that plan for them moving forward.
Life ownership, like no one can do it for us. Like it's like it applies to everything. There's no quick fix. There's no easy fix. There's no miracle pill. There's no miracle. There is, but there's not. You know what I mean? Like, it has to come from the person, because then it's more significant, and then it actually builds their self-esteem and confidence because they did it themselves and they got through it. And I also believe that those people, when you are on that path of trying to heal yourself and do the work, that the teacher appears, or the guide, the right person appears to help you on that trajectory.
Yeah, it's about empowering people. Making them feel confident, and
power.
Also, a lot of people, they do have the strength and the skills. People who are going through a tough time, you naturally will develop some coping skills, and they can be on a whole spectrum of whether they're like quote unquote healthy or unhealthy. Some people might go down the path of substance abuse and addiction, but that is actually a form of a coping mechanism.
Absolutely. Self-medicating.
Yeah, and so if a lot of people have existing coping mechanisms and skills and strength and resilience, so it's kind of about, as you said, being a soundboard and reflecting that back to them so that they can see that for themselves and feel empowered. But it's not easy. It's a process, and something that I've been reflecting on a lot recently is that, because you said it was really intense, and it is, and I think that I'm really, because I've had such a privileged life, it enables me to take on a lot of these issues. Like, a lot of what I do and what I talk about deals with some really intense stuff, but because I don't have that lived experience, it is easier for me to deal with. I spoke to someone recently who has had a lot of trauma, and I think sometimes she gets frustrated that people for other people it's a concept. It's not, and it doesn't have that same emotional response. And for me, I think a lot of that suffering is more of a concept, but it makes it easier for me to take on that emotional work because it doesn't bring up as much. And I think because of that, it's also my responsibility to do more of the emotional labor because it is inherently less difficult for me.
You think your cup is less full, so you have the capacity to take on more?
Yeah, exactly. Not everyone can do it, and not everyone should have to do it. So if I can and I find that I have the emotional space to be able to do it, then and the skills, why shouldn't I? Yeah.
Absolutely. It's great. But a lot of people don't think like that. They don't, because it's all myself included. It's selfishness. It's all about me. And I really like it when I see people step out of that and go, okay, well, I'm not going to think about me for a minute. I want to think about someone else. And yeah, I love that you do that. And again, I said it in our last podcast, for someone who you're, in your 20s,
I'm not that young anymore.
I wasn't going to. Well, I don't like to say young because I don't actually really believe in age, because it does come down to the experiences someone's had in life. A young person who's had, a variety of different experiences in their life could have a lot more wisdom than someone who's older and hasn't. So, yeah, maybe I shouldn't keep using that with you, but I do like that mentality. It's really, really a message that I'd love to push in the world. Get out of yourself. What can you do for other people? I mean, even Martin Luther King said it in one of his famous quotes. He said, the question is not what you can do, or maybe it was, I don't know. It's one of those leaders. Was it Martin Luther King?
I don't know.
And he said something like,
I think I know the quote, yeah.
Was it ask not what you can do for yourself or what you can do for others? No, the fundamental problem that we have is people are asking what can be done for me when you should be asking what you can do for others. Something like that. I don't know.
I think it's
I
related,
think I just
though.
messed that up.
Yeah, and
Could have been
I feel like
JFK.
people know what you mean. I don't know, because I think, as you touched on before, it's not inherently selfless because I'm getting something out of it.
What?
A sense of satisfaction and purpose and meaning and joy.
And that's the hack.
Yeah, so I think it's
that's the
about
hack.
exactly using your inherent selfishness or desire, self-interestedness maybe is a better way of putting it, to serve others. Because I think, it's kind of natural to do things for your own self, and I don't think we should necessarily feel ashamed of that. But maybe.
But it's not to play devil's advocate a little bit, it's not a form of narcissism, is it? Where it's hey, look at me, I do so much, I'm helping others, everyone look at me, I'm so giving.
Yeah. Well, some
sure
people are
there's some
like
of
that though. Exactly. And I think that's been one of my fears, for example, going on a podcast like this and talking about it, or even being talking about it on my social media, I'm really wary of that perception of just being oh my God, look at me, I'm doing all these things, I'm such a good person. There's a concept called performative activism.
Okay.
Which is that idea that you're only doing something to serve your own purpose and not because you actually care about the issues, or you only care on a superficial level to the extent that it can serve your interests. I think we see a lot of that, for example, on Instagram, where people might post a black square for Black Lives Matter and then not do anything else, or get the selfie at the protest, but that's all you do. And it took a while for me to actually feel comfortable, I think, in coming out and talking about it, especially online, because I was worried about what people would think. But now I'm I don't care. If you think I'm doing that, then I don't care, because I know that I'm not now. I think I had to go through my own process of being no, I'm doing this for these reasons.
Yeah, and I think humans are so intuitive in the end of the day that they can pick up on who's legit and who's not. And like you said, you can't be concerned about what other people are going to think, especially when I feel you are. I mean, it's a tricky one when you're advocating for such important issues and such, potentially life-changing issues. And And I do think that Instagram breeds what you're talking about, but I also think like Instagram's there, it's evil, but let's utilize it for good, for getting the right, for advocating for the right things. Let's.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not going anywhere. So like instead of taking selfies of you at the beach in in your new swimsuit or whatever, like use it and promote some good stuff. So,
and I actually think the performative aspects can also contribute to good things as well. Like even if people are sometimes posting photos and raising awareness about things and their motivations might be more self-interested, they're still raising awareness. Does it really matter what motivates them? I think sometimes we can get a bit too caught up in criticizing the person, and everyone's on their own journey. You can start by doing that, and then you might become more interested in it. So I think if people are still raising awareness, I don't want to be too critical of their motivations, because I think that turns people away.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, because then you're worried about being the perfect activist or whatever. And it's funny because in our last conversation, sorry, I'm talking a lot, so whenever you want to interrupt me, please do.
I'm talking a lot. Well, you are the guest on the show, so.
But let me know if you want to interrupt me.
Not at all. I'm loving it. I'm really just hanging off your every word, to be honest.
I was going to say in our last interview, I think, you introduced me as an activist, and we talked a bit about how I'd come to embrace that term. And since then, actually, I've talked to some people who are a lot smarter than me, and we have had some reflections.
I don't believe it. Keep going.
And about how that can actually be not that productive, labeling yourself as an activist, because it kind of creates a marginal identity, and it differentiates activists and non-activists.
Thank you.
And I think it makes the barrier of entry higher, where people think, oh, well, I'm not like that, so I can't do that. And I think it also, I think, is bad optics if you're trying to advocate for an issue and the media is talking about how it's a group of activists rather than a group of concerned citizens or students or young people, for example. There's this association of activism with you're pushing an agenda.
And it's more militant. I think it's associated with people who are militant as well.
Yeah, it's got a lot of baggage.
So it can be polarizing.
Yeah.
Is that what yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that sometimes it will turn people away when I think it's about breaking down the barriers and talking more about the issues and not making it about an identity. So I thought that was quite interesting. I spoke to someone recently, we were at a training for Tomorrow Movement, a full weekend training, and the guy I was talking to was oh yeah, but I'm not like you. I'm not an activist. And I'm like, what do you mean? We're both here. We both care about these issues. We're both trying to figure out what we can do to make the world a better place. What separates me from you? Sure, I might be doing X, Y, Z, but I don't know. It just made me think about how maybe the language around that needs to be considered a bit more.
I think so. And I also think people associate activism with someone holding a placard at a rally. Well, if you do that, you're an activist, It's not true, that's just someone being active at a rally. But speaking of rallies, recently you attended a rally in Sydney, the March for Justice rallies. How was that?
Yeah, so that was on March 15th. There were marches and rallies all over Australia, and that was in response to what's happening in politics at the moment. Over the past few weeks, there's been many allegations. I should probably give a bit of a trigger warning here.
Well, just before you start, just for those that may live under a rock and have no idea what's going on and don't follow the current news and media, can you give us a breakdown? And if you want to do a trigger warning, let's go.
Sure. So, trigger warning for sexual assault. This started, I think, late February, when a young woman called Brittany Higgins has come out and alleged that she was raped in Parliament by a political staffer. I don't know how much detail I should go into here, but she was drunk and the person took her into Parliament and took advantage of her, and she was raped literally in the office of an MP that she worked for, and they treated it as a political issue and basically tried to cover it up and didn't give her a lot of support. And she came out with those allegations. She was inspired by Grace Tame, who's a sexual assault survivor and advocate. She won the Australian of the Year award. And she saw Grace Tame and a picture of Scott Morrison together. And Brittany was really upset and outraged at that, thinking at the hypocrisy of Scott Morrison standing next to someone professing to care about these issues when she knew from her own experience that they actually don't care. So she was empowered and inspired to come out and tell her story. And since then, there's been revelation after revelation. Christian Porter was then the following week. There were allegations of rape from a few decades ago now when he was younger, of raping a 16-year-old woman who then actually took her life last year. And he's the Attorney General, Christian Porter. Sorry, let me know if if I need to clarify anything. But he's basically the highest law officer in the country. So any matter of law, he's the ultimate person. So the fact that he's been accused of a crime that's so terrible and horrible, even if it can't be pursued criminally anymore because the victim is unfortunately now dead, it still needs to be taken seriously, and the government still needs to be taking that seriously, especially given the amount of power that he has and the questions, the question of character that comes into it. So that happened, and then after that, that's when the March for Justice happened, because people were so outraged and really, really particular outraged at the government's response of basically not doing anything and trying to dismiss it. No one's lost their job as of yet. I think they're just going to probably reshuffle, move a few people around and hope that it blows over. And 1 in 5 women in Australia have experienced sexual assault. So for a lot of women, it's really personal, and everyone could recognise and felt really personally upset and angry, because you can see that in your own lives, of women not being believed and women's issues, and particularly violence against women not being taken seriously, and the structures and the impunity basically of powerful men being able to do that stuff and think that they can get away with it. So that's what the March for Justice was about. And there were tens of thousands of women all across the country who rallied and mobilised to basically call on our government to do better, to stand up against sexism and misogyny, and for there to be accountability, I think, is really the main issue. We need to hold people accountable for their actions. It's not much we're asking for, I mean, it is. It's a huge issue, and it's not just in Parliament. It's a societal issue, but it needs to start somewhere, and it should start at the top. Sorry, there's been even more revelations since. It's horrifying. It's going to continue, so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
How are you feeling personally?
Yeah. Like, I know some women who can't look at the news at the moment because there's just so much, and it's really triggering and emotionally exhausting. I spoke to my mum last night. She just said she was constantly angry all of the time, and because there's been new thing after new thing, there's been like staffers who were like filming themselves masturbating on people's desks and sending different things around. There's been people, bringing sex workers in and having sex, and, What else is the recent one? Other various different people being accused of sexual assault and harassment. There's just revelation after revelation, and it is honestly, I haven't like kept abreast of it as much as I like. I mean, as much as I could, because it is a bit much, and it's also very easy to get desensitized too. And I think that that's ultimately what they're hoping for, because it takes a lot. It's a huge emotional toll to continue to keep up the pressure and the momentum in order for something to happen and to keep caring about it. And you either burn out emotionally or you become so desensitized that it's like you don't care anymore. It's just, it's another thing. Like, of course it is. We already know the politicians are corrupt, blah, blah, blah. So it can be hard to keep up momentum. And for me, I think I'm trying to strike that balance of like knowing enough to know what's happening, but like being careful and taking breaks from the news when I need to as well. And again, it comes back to, I do think I've been really lucky. I haven't had been sexually assaulted yet. So I think for me as well, it's fundamentally just less triggering. So that's why I think it's also, again, important for me to keep abreast of it because I can and then take action. But yeah, the rally was like super powerful.
I was going to ask that. Describe the energy and the vibe at the rally on the day.
Yeah, it's like it was one of the biggest mobilizations for women's rights in recent decades. I wasn't at Canberra. I was at Sydney. Some family members went to Canberra, so they got to see Brittany Higgins speak. I was at the Sydney rally, and yeah, so many women coming together were all wearing black to mourn and grieve the loss of life of women, but also the trauma and the suffering, because that's one of the huge impacts of being sexually assaulted. It does fundamentally change the rest of your life, unfortunately. So it was really powerful hearing different people speak. Some Indigenous women disproportionately suffer higher rates of sexual violence and domestic violence, and it's the feminist movement needs to do better to include them and other women of colour in the conversation. I have to say I was at the back, so I couldn't really hear too much, which I'm kind of used to at this point of rallies. I'm like, if I can hear the speeches, it's a bit of a bonus, but not necessarily what I expect. But I mean, it's a good sign because that means there's heaps of people. Like I think there were like 20,000 or so. And then we marched, chanting, and that's always really powerful as well, all coming together with the signs. And I think it's really important to show because you can be angry online and in your own homes and talking to people, but it is important to actually get out and demonstrate the size and extent of the amount of people who care about this issue. And it was really great to see a lot of men there as well, standing in solidarity, because it's not a women's issue. It's fundamentally, 97% of perpetrators are men, and whether that's abusing women or men or non-binary people, most of the perpetrators are men. So really it is a men's issue. And I think for too long, maybe guys have kind of just opted out and been like, it's a bit of a women's thing, so I'm not going to and they're probably scared of having an opinion. And I mean, kind of fair enough. I'd be a bit scared too, maybe sometimes of people's response. But I think that it's really good when men do step up and be allies and listen. Yeah, I was just there. I was busy handing out stickers, actually. I had all these stickers, so I was just going through the crowd handing them out.
Were you representing the Tomorrow movement?
No, I was there. I mean, I took some Amnesty signs, so I was kind of there with Amnesty. We do, obviously, women's rights is a lot of what we do, not necessarily in Australia, a lot of overseas work. Although we are going to be working in conjunction with different community organisations pushing for coercive control to be criminalised. So that's basically a form of domestic violence that's not physical violence, but the psychological impacts and the the coercion and manipulation that occurs in a domestic violence context that actually has more long-term impacts in terms of suffering and trauma than the physical injuries. So, and that's currently not criminalized. So technically you can be abusing your partner using coercive control, not touch them and get away with it.
Why do you think it's not criminalized?
It's difficult to define, but I also think it's just been an evolving of our understanding of domestic abuse, I should say.
Do you think that's continuing?
Yes.
Do you think there's a lot of confusion and ignorance around what the definition of domestic violence is?
Definitely. I think a lot of people think about it as hitting, you know.
That's the first place most people's minds go.
Yeah, but someone can be I think a lot of I've been using domestic violence, which is the common term, but there has been a shift towards domestic abuse as maybe a better way of understanding it because of that association of violence with being like a physical thing.
Yes.
So I should be saying domestic abuse. But yeah, people can be in that situation and not actually be hit at all, but they will suffer emotional abuse, verbal abuse, gaslighting, which is where someone convinces you that you're crazy and
you know, it's funny. Like, I didn't understand what gaslighting meant, and I'm going to assume that there's other people out there who don't know what it means. And it's a very interesting term, that one. And it's and it originates back to some story about some couple that lived in a castle, and it was all the lighting was from gas lamps, and the husband wanted to make his wife feel like she was going crazy, so he got all their servants every night just to dim the gas lamps just like a notch or two every night. And then he told them all that if his wife asks, is it dark in here or darker, they're to say no, it's just normal. And so then he did that every night, and then she'd come, oh, is it dark in here tonight? Oh no, darling, I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, oh, is that the original story of what gaslighting is? Like, yeah, just. Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know the etymology.
It's a bit of a tangent, but I just because it's popped up a few times. I'm like, what exactly is gaslighting, and where did it come from? Where did that terminology come from?
Yeah, it's being used a lot now in more of a.
So effectively, it's not deception or
kind of undermining of your sense of reality and your own perception of your own experience, basically. So convincing you that your perception on reality is not true.
I think that's concise. Good one. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. That you're crazy or making things up, or that, yeah, I think it's like about undermining your own understanding of your own experience, and that can be used as a tool of abuse. And basically there's a whole range of different things that fall under coercive control, and that there's now a huge push for that to be recognized as a crime, so that people can actually do something about it, and people can be held accountable, and there's options for victims, because at the moment there's not a lot of options. And it's also helps to educate people as well, because sometimes women or other people in those situations, they don't even know that they're in domestic abuse, because they say, oh, but he hasn't hit me, you know, so it's not domestic abuse. So it's also about raising awareness about all the different ways that, yeah, you can be in an abusive relationship.
And like you said, I think, yeah, defining the situation would be very challenging, especially because, you know, human relationships are complex on all levels, whether they're intimate, professional, and everything in between. And human nature, in our imperfection, people do behaviours that they may not be aware of that are harmful to others, and especially in relationships. So it could be happening on both sides. And I guess that's what makes it challenging for legal systems to clearly identify and I guess seek justice for? Would that be?
It's a difficult thing to define because exactly, what differentiates a toxic relationship or an unhealthy relationship between a relationship of domestic abuse and coercive control. But they've tried to do that by talking about it as a systemic or pattern of behavior over time that creates a power differential between the two people. So it's not just like having a heated argument and saying something that you regret, or maybe being a bit too, maybe your insecurities are coming out and you're trying to control aspects of your partner. And maybe that's not the best example, but there is they've tried to build in a difference so that it can clearly define what it is as distinguished from just toxic relationships.
Okay, so like it's moving to it's evolving and moving closer to a more clearly defined outline of what those behaviors are and what they mean and how they could be I guess, for lack of a better word, punished or justice served on. Okay.
Yeah, like accountability. And justice for the victims.
But it's progress, not perfection, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's going to constantly evolve. Our understanding of consent is evolving constantly. I think it's just part of the process, and our laws trying to keep up with the cultural changes. It's a bit of a back and forth process. But I think it's extremely important that this does get passed. So it's really great to see that that this is now happening. There's going to be a big push for it this year and in the following years. So hopefully we can make that change happen. Because it's like one woman's killed a week, and 2 minutes every 2 minutes there's
globally.
No, in Australia.
In Australia,
one woman's killed a week by their intimate partner.
Oh, I thought not every two, because you said every 2 minutes.
Every 2 minutes is the police will get a call on a domestic abuse matter.
Right.
Yeah.
And usually those calls are more in relation to physical violence. Right. So and then there's all the other calls that don't get made in regards to other forms of violence.
Yeah. Well, it takes a lot for someone to get to that point of calling the police. Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So
it's
big.
Yeah. It's huge, and it's really the issue that I think we need to be doing a lot more on in terms of women's rights. It's the most pressing issue that's actually killing women in this country. So.
It's overwhelming to hear, and it's overwhelming when I, reflect on our political system, and my mind just goes, and I said this on the last podcast, my mind just goes to, the problem's too big, and it's so broken, and this is just another example of highlighting an already broken system. Are we making progress though? Do you feel like progress is being made in terms of creating equity and creating equality? Are we moving towards equitable models in our society?
For just in general?
For human rights, and specifically for women and minority groups. Do you think we are making progress? Like, let's say if we went back 5 years, what do you think?
No, I definitely think we are.
When I seen that stuff going on most recently with our politicians, I just was like, oh, fuck, we've gone backwards. Like, we're back in the 50s, man. Are you serious? That's what I kept, that's what I kept thinking.
Yeah, I don't think we've gone backwards. I think that it actually demonstrates the fact that people are so outraged, and the fact that there's a national conversation happening, and that people are out in the streets, and that people are actually saying, no, this is unacceptable, demonstrates that there has been a change. And also the fact that people now, and many victims and survivors, are feeling that they can come out and that they will be believed. That's a change, because many people don't, and they won't come out for many, many years. It's actually very normal for people to only talk about it many years after it's happened. because they're scared about their response. And I think that it speaks to the change. Me Too has actually had a huge impact on that, shifting the conversation and raising awareness to allow this to happen. And I think this is kind of our Me Too moment in Australia, where people are finally saying, no, enough is enough, and people are finding their voice and holding power, speaking truth to power. So yeah, I think there has been change, but I think it's important that we don't make assumptions that change is inevitable. Progress isn't something that just comes through the passing of time. Rights can be taken away, and it's a roller coaster, And so it's always important that we are continuing to hold people accountable and call for justice to make sure that we are progressing forward, and not be complacent. And yeah, it's disappointing, but at the same time, like these things take time, and these systems that we have in place are hundreds of years old. So how can we, I'm like, of course it's still like crap, because we're still using the same systems that have been set up by like a bunch of old white men in colonial times.
It keeps coming back to that. It really does. And I was just like thinking about how, let's face it, as a society and us humans of the last year, we've had so much, and beyond that, like especially Australians with the bushfires the year before, we've just had so much to contend with in so many different ways. And then when this most recent issue came up, I just feels like we're in this constant state of catastrophe, and I think people are just getting exhausted, and it's depressing. And I must admit, and I mean, I've been saying this a lot, and I've done it for a while, I really have to regulate my consumption of mainstream media for a personal well-being perspective, from a personal well-being perspective.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it can be just completely exhausting when you start to go down different rabbit holes in your mind of what needs to be fixed and yeah. But I love what you said, like complacency is the devil. Like we have to be wary of complacency. Like it's constantly raising awareness, engaging in conversation. I mean that's where the healing comes from. That's where the ideas are spread, and we have the means to do it more than ever. Okay, through all our outlets, like use our personal platforms and outlets for good, not narcissism. You know? So
it is a tricky balance, and I think that you shouldn't, you're well within your right, and that's completely valid to limit your news consumption for well-being. I think that's so important. We all need to be practicing self-care and taking care of ourselves first, because we can't, I don't actually like saying that you have to take care of yourself first before you do anything else, because I don't actually believe that.
Why?
I think some people...
You don't think you should take care of yourself first?
I do, but I don't. I think some people say, for example, what's the thing they say? Like, you need to love yourself first before you can, like, love other people. And I think it can get a little bit murky. Like people who, for example, if you have a mental health issue, you don't have to fix that, quote unquote, fix that, like, in order to be in a relationship and to be loved. Like, but I think... it's important to take care of your own well-being, so that you are able to care for others. And obviously that comes first. You need to be well enough yourself in order to give back to others. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Well, it makes sense. But firstly, I think, like, yeah, I personally believe if you're not in a good state, you're no good to anyone else, in terms of you're not going to have the actual physical or mental energy to help other people. So it's I think that's important. It's kind of like, I just thought the analogy of being on an airplane, when you got to put your face mask on first so you can breathe, so you can then help others, because otherwise you're not going to be able to breathe and you're going to be no use to anyone.
Exactly.
But I also believe that when you use the example of mental health issues, I think that is actually also your issue is also a gift that you can then use to help other people and have a shared experience.
Mm.
And you can utilize it as a tool.
Yeah, that's a
as
nice way of
opposed to a
looking at it.
defect.
Yeah.
And I think once you that perspective shift on it, it's like, hey, this is not necessarily a bad thing. It's challenging, it's hard, but I can use this because there's other people who are also suffering, and let's do it together, because a problem shared is a problem halved. So yeah,
It allows you to have deeper empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's more about like you don't have to be perfect or have all of, there's no one that doesn't have any kind of like issues or personal struggles. So you're never going to get to that point. So, before you can do X, Y, Z. So it's a balance of those things, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. It makes so much sense. Whew. Listen, man, it's just like, yeah, I'm so interested in what you're talking about, and I'm so glad you shared that stuff about the rallies, because I did notice that I've noticed you're someone who's not overly active on social media, but then recently you've been very active on social media, and with some of the stuff you've been involved in, it's been fantastic. So, are you still, like we spoke about this last time, you are part of the Tomorrow movement? So give us an update on the Tomorrow movement. What's going on there?
Sure. Yeah, I go through stages on my Instagram. I feel like it's either nothing or like a lot.
I must admit, when you put something up, I listen, I look at it, but I don't just scroll past it. It's like, well, if she's putting something up, it's because she really cares about it. Like, it's significant.
Maybe. Well, I'm like, it's going to be funny when I start like getting more used to Instagram and posting just things in my life. People are going to be like, oh, I'm not interested anymore. Tomorrow movement. So we did some training recently, and basically we're gearing up for a big day of action on May 4th, calling for a climate jobs guarantee, which is one of our essential demands and things that we're fighting for. So a climate jobs guarantee is basically a transformative plan that will create thousands of good jobs and guarantee a good job to everyone who wants one, and address the climate crisis and economic crisis that we're facing at the scale and speed necessary. So we're basically calling on politicians to actually recognize the scale of what we're facing and act with the urgency that requires, because now we've only got like 9.5 years until 2030, which is when scientists have said is likely to be the tipping point of no return, basically, where things just go out of control and spiral. So we've got like 10 years, less than 10 years, to seriously do everything that we can to tackle the climate crisis. And the only way that we can act at the scale necessary is through government action. Individual action is important, but we're really running out of time. And governments, with the current system that we have, they do have the power to enact mass changes really quickly. We saw that with COVID. They can actually put in place policies that overnight, they put in place policies that lifted Australians out of poverty.
Isn't that good? Let's use that example all the time, because it's like, hey, look, you can pass things quick. You can get things changed really quick.
If you wanted to.
Great, if you want to.
Yeah,
if it's in your best interest.
Exactly. And like when wars happen, there's huge mobilizations and changes possible. So it is, governments can do it. They just don't want to, because there's no political will, and because they're too influenced by the impact of big business, which is choking our democracy. And both of our major parties are beholden to big business interests at the moment. And part of our strategy is actually trying to break the hold of big business on the Labor Party, as the party of supposedly the people that has a history of alignment with the unions and working class, and trying to have them force them to have more ambitious climate policy, basically that would lift all Australians out of poverty, and address the climate crisis. So we're kind of trying to tackle two things at once, which is a lot, but I think that it's this is a really unique opportunity to actually have solutions that work for everyone. One of the dangers of kind of the transition that we're seeing at the moment away from fossil fuels into more of renewable energy is that a lot of these huge mega companies are just moving to renewable energy, but the same structures of inequality is still being replicated. So we want to actually use this as a chance to change the systems so that it's a more equitable society for everyone, and that other people can see justice, and it's not just big business continuing to dominate everyone for their own profits, basically.
Like, you'd agree that the climate crisis requires long-term solutions, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with me if I said that our political structure of 4-year terms is inhibiting real strategic plans?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the primary concern is just getting elected. It's very short term. So and it's short term, and so then they're putting in appealing immediate short term, policies to get the vote, because people want to see change now. But when it comes to the climate crisis, that all goes out the window. Yeah.
So I'm going to put you on the spot. What's the solution?
Well, we would say that the climate jobs guarantee is Tomorrow Movement. That's the solution that we're putting forward. But I think that that's one of the fundamental issues with climate change is that it is a long-term thing. And humans fundamentally, like our brains just don't think like that. We're concerned with our immediate everyday things that are impacting our life. And it's really difficult to care a lot about something that feels so far away and in the future, even though we have had bushfires last year, even though we've just had floods recently, and we're going to see more and more of that in the future. It's really hard to continue to care about that. And also unfortunately, it's not a voting issue. The vast majority of Australians actually want to see stronger action on climate change, but it won't shift their vote. And that's the real annoying thing. So in terms of the solution, I mean, I don't think there is a solution. I think we all need to, there's a multitude of solutions basically. And there's many different things that need to be changed. Because there's, overseas and other countries need to be doing their bit as well. But, we're here in Australia, so we can do our bit. And I think fundamentally the government needs to take action. It's not enough for us as individuals. It's fun. It's also just not our fault either. And it's up to the government to take action, to do the best that they can, to address these issues and mitigate, because unfortunately we're at the point now where a lot of this is already locked in. So there's already a guaranteed percentage of warming. So yeah, I feel like, I don't know if I answered that. I went a bit all over the place.
It did. I mean, and it's, that was a big question. It is big, but like, who cares? Like, let's have the big questions. Let's have let's surmise. Let's brainstorm, because I mean, again, like, I just think you got to talk about it, even though it may seem it's hard for me to talk about, because I used this term last time. Like, I'm feeling very jaded, but I'm like, no. Just push through the jadedness and just keep addressing it. Think about it sometimes, like, and just develop a level of consciousness. Don't put your head in the sand. And I think that's something I'm personally working on. It's like, I
think a lot of people are really jaded with politics, and then I think that's why we've seen a lot of like the popularization of individual action on environmental issues, like focusing on reducing your own waste and plastic consumption, and buying ethically and conscious consumption and things like that, because it feels more in your control. It's something that you can do.
Thank you.
And then you feel good about it. And that's important for people, and I can understand why people go down that path. But I also think that it's really important that we have the collective action, the political action, because it's a lot harder to achieve, but it gets you the best like bang for your buck. Like, For me, that's why I pursue that, because it's like, well, if I'm going to be putting my energy anywhere, it's going to be the one with the most, that's the most effective, that will cause the greatest amount of change. And to get more specific about the solutions, like some things that people are calling for are to stop all new fossil fuel projects, basically. So immediately, or not immediately, but actually having a plan to stop fossil fuel projects and the creation of new coal, oil and gas mining, and having a just transition. So there's actually a plan to bring those workers and the people and the communities that will be impacted along so that they're not left behind. And they should be at the forefront of creating those solutions that work with for their communities. We need to have massive investment in renewables and technology, which we know will need to be an important part of the solution in terms of mitigation strategies. And working again, another important thing is utilizing First Nations knowledge about how to manage the environment, which they've been doing for tens of thousands of years. So working with First Nations people to come up with more sustainable solutions for environmental management.
Community engagement. Like people engage the community and then give them some ownership, give them some personal investment in it. You know, like as opposed to making them feel segregated, and then decisions being made on their behalf by people who don't really understand what it's like and to live in that situation. And I'm not just talking about our First Nations people either. I'm just talking about any communities where governments come in and regulate or change or put policy in. And I think that's a really easy one for governments to implement. Is just like, let's engage the community in the process. And in effect, it could even create, like you said, mitigate problems later on as well, like and more sustainable solutions that are enduring and enriching.
Well, communities know best what they need.
Exactly.
And that's part of a climate jobs guarantee, is that the government should be working with communities and creating jobs on the ground. That doesn't necessarily have to be related specifically to the climate. It could also be around caring and teaching and a range of other different work that would serve the community. And the government, it's another part of it is, I think we need to rebuild the public sector. A lot of, unfortunately, previously, government services have been privatised, like education, healthcare, energy. They've all been sold off to the private sector so that it's more about a profit-based model. And I think we need to actually take that back into government-owned so that we can have more control over the quality, and that it also improves the working conditions for the people as well.
Yeah. Yes. You're right.
There's many other solutions that people are also, there's so many people doing important things, and that's the thing. Like, these are some more top level policies.
Yeah.
But there's people on the ground doing things. There's people, it's important to be coming up with different like business models and alternatives to the things that we're currently doing as well. So it's a whole, there's so much to do, and people can find their own area in which they can make a difference, because I think most people now are quite concerned.
Yeah, I think so. I feel like there's a level of consciousness growing. People are getting more and more concerned. I really do believe that that's one of the best things to come out of the pandemic. People have had more time to step back and think and realise and look at the big issues. And yeah, it's good, man. We're in a really interesting time in the world. I really feel like we're on the cusp of of real change, but also there's a cultural shift occurring, a massive cultural shift. The biggest I've seen in my lifetime, like I'm not that old, I'm older than you, but I see it. Like I've never seen this sort of stuff happening in the world before in terms of the conversations that people are having and the topics that we're talking about. I haven't seen that level of it. It's good. It's good. It's exhausting.
Yeah, well, we can also, there has been a huge history of protest, especially in the 1960s, I think.
Yeah.
There's huge cultural change, and a lot of that came about with mass movements and
Thank you.
getting out on the streets. So I think we're probably going to be we're starting to see some of that happen now.
Can I ask, at the rally recently, what was the police presence like?
Well, I've been to a few rallies recently.
Sorry, the
most
International
recent
Justice
one?
Rally.
The March for Justice rally was pretty safe. I think that it would have been really bad move. There wasn't a lot planned in terms of civil disobedience and disruption. It was kind of just your standard rally. So they shut, and they would have had to have notified the police and things like that because it was so large. You have to shut down streets. But I have gone to a rally recently in Wollongong that was a climate rally for the international school strikes, or Fridays for Future movement that Greta Thunberg is kind of
amazing.
Head of, or the face of. That was last Friday. Oh my God, was that only last Friday? Whoa. And the police there were actually pretty rough. They were pushing some of the protesters. They had they were up on the horses, so they were mounted police, and they were shoving young people onto the street.
Were they COVID safe events? Was that something that came up while you were there?
There were some people wearing masks. They had hand sanitizer, and they recommended people to sign into a QR code. But I feel like it was definitely under the limit of, it was within the current restrictions,
Gotcha.
the rules. And I think the police were just a lot more organised. And to be fair, people did try and get onto the street and occupy and shut down traffic. So, they're trying to stop that from happening.
I know, but do you think it's necessary to really get people to make an impact? That level of militancy, is that a word? But to be a little bit.
What do you think?
Yeah, I do. I'll say it. I don't advocate for violence at all, but I question: are we having violence perpetuated upon us by our current leaders and structures? And when do we start to push back? I kind of feel like, and I'm generalising, and it's my opinion, but I feel like many Australians are quite complacent and submissive, and compared to other countries. I often think about France for some reason, that their communities and their society is very vocal. That if there's any violation of their or erosion of their civil liberties, they kick back, man. We don't do that. Which is, again, I'm not advocating for those levels of extremism where there's any sort of violence or damage or anything like that. But I do think that we need to exercise our civil rights a little bit more. What's the word I'm looking for? Staunchly. Again, that's just my opinion. Yeah, I think we need to be staunch because, let's face it, we're being staunched.
I think there is a people don't understand maybe the power of protest in Australia as much.
They do.
And I can kind of understand. I've had to also, the other day at the rally when people were trying to go onto the street and the police were there in a line trying to push us back, I was a bit oh, I don't know if I want to do this.
Yeah.
It's challenging my own kind of deferral to authority and wanting to be, a good citizen and not wanting to upset people and thinking, am I doing the right thing? And I can understand when people look at things like that and look at people occupying and doing sit-ins and and are confused and annoyed maybe because they're like, it is mildly inconvenient for them to be late to work or something. But if we look at history, these are the actions that actually have worked. There's a reason why people are doing it.
Yeah.
And there is a big difference between civil disobedience and non-violent direct action and actual like violence.
Yes.
A lot of these things, no one's being hurt. It's just that is creating disruption to the normal processes of day-to-day life. And that's essential, and many important civil rights that we take for granted today have been won using those same tactics. That's, you mentioned Martin Luther King before.
Yeah, I kind of really messed that quote up. I feel so stupid because he said so much good stuff. But anyway, keep going.
I mean, I don't really know all of his quotes either, obviously. But like the Black civil rights movement in the US employed very similar tactics. Even Black Lives Matter is a recent example.
Thank you.
Where people were taking to the streets and protesting for weeks and weeks, and it worked. And you can disagree, but I'd challenge those people to be like, well, what do you suggest then? What?
Yeah. Well, that's it.
And we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't have to. That's the thing. It's like people have tried to use the proper channels. We try to email our representatives and ask our representatives to do certain things. We exercise our right to vote. We follow the rules, and then it doesn't work. So we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't feel that it was necessary. And with a lot of these issues, unfortunately, there isn't that leadership, and we need to be showing out, calling on our leaders to do better.
Agreed. And Martin Luther King quote was, because I was like, I can't stuff that up. He said, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And I was like, it's simple, it's true. Like if you keep asking yourself that question, what are you doing for others? And I also think it's a life hack in terms of getting to those good feelings. So it's
win-win.
It's a win-win because, hey, I like to feel good.
Yeah.
Call me crazy.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. This is great, Manny. I love talking to you. I love listening to your perspective on things. It's been so great. I kind of feel like we covered all the things I wanted to talk about today. So I'm going to just launch into, I ask all guests to come with a cause. So, God, I mean, you've already advocated for so much, but is there a specific, something specific you'd like to direct people to so they can also participate and be active in some way?
Mm-hmm. I wanted to choose a cause today to help Indigenous and First Nations women because, we're hearing a lot at the moment about how women are treated in Australia in sexual assault, and unfortunately that does disproportionately affect First Nations women. 75 to 90%, depending on how you measure it, of Indigenous women have experienced domestic or sexual violence, which is just appalling. So I wanted to direct people to support Mudgeongal, which is a community service based in Redfern in Sydney, and it's all owned by and led by Aboriginal women, which is really, really important when talking about these solutions, that they're actually controlled by First Nations people, and they work with vulnerable young women, helping them who are facing domestic violence, helping them with legal support, with material support, with shelter, also educational programs so that they know their rights, and other empowerment programs as well. And they're doing some really amazing work out of Sydney, so on Gadigal land. So, yes, please support Mudgeongal with a donation that will directly affect the lives of vulnerable First Nations women in Redfern and Sydney and surrounds.
Epic. And there's a link to that in this episode's show notes. Whatever platform you are listening to this podcast on, you'll be able to find that link in the show notes. This podcast is also available on a variety of platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Buzzsprout, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Podcast Addict, and Overcast, and Google Podcasts. And so please subscribe, leave a review. It just helps me to keep going weekly and getting epic humans such as Maneesha to share her voice and inspire, because you are inspirational, let's face it. And you keep saying you're not, but I think you are. Anyway, so what are you scrunching your face up for?
It's just awkward. I don't know.
Sorry, sorry if I made you feel awkward.
No, thank you.
Can you speak into the microphone, by the way?
Sorry, thanks.
No, that's awkward.
Thank you, Shan.
You're on a podcast. You're speaking to the microphone, Maneesha. Jeez. I'm just kidding. It's kind of.
Yeah, please support Shan and this great podcast. You're also inspirational. You know, you're lifting other people's, giving other people a platform, and I think that's really important. So well done.
Yeah, thanks. I wonder if I'm actually doing anything, but again, like I kind of feel like, well, it's doing something's better than nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
And I just feel like, yeah, if I can give people who are much more intelligent and conscious and enlightened than me a place to have a voice, well, maybe I'm doing that's my little contribution. You know, that's my form of activism, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Start a podcast, but don't make it better than mine. Okay. Just kidding. Yeah. So listen, Maneesha, I got a gift for you. Now you've already got a pair of these, but do you want another pair of Indo soles?
Sure. Yay. Thank you.
You had an issue with what happened to the last? You got a pair last time. What happened? Tell us all about it.
I just have some awkward sized feet.
What do you mean you got I
have little flippers.
But it's not your feet. Maybe it's Indo sole. Maybe their shoes are too narrow.
No, I think it might have just been I probably ordered the wrong size. So I'm happy to give
You want another pair?
another crack with the right size this time.
Just in time for winter. You can wear them with socks, you know. So socks and sandals, like.
Yeah, I don't have like slippers around the house, so maybe I can use, you know, with the socks. Socks and sandals.
Socks and sandals.
I can rock that.
Would you go in public with them, socks and sandals? Yes.
Maybe.
Come on, I've seen the kids are doing it. I seen this really cool kid the other day. He had socks and Crocs.
Oh, and that's bold.
And I hate Crocs, right?
Crocs are like becoming a thing in that ironic way, you know, like yeah.
That's what it is. It's ironic fashion. Is that what it is?
It's ironic until it gets to the point where it's not, and people are just embrace it, like the mullet. You know, that I feel like that was like ironic, and now it's just cool again.
Well, people just became desensitized to the mullet. You know.
Fashion is circular.
It is. I try not to discriminate against anyone, but if you've got a mullet, like I can't help it. I might discriminate against you in some way.
You'll still judge them.
Like I'll cross the street or I won't talk to you. Okay.
Wow.
Is that bad?
Oh, I've come to love the mullet again.
What?
Have you some people look really sexy with a mullet. I mean, sexy people look sexy wearing anything, I think.
Get off the podcast.
Okay, time to call it wraps.
Just kidding. Really? You really think the mullet's sexy? Dude, you know, like, oh my God, there's so many mullet people out there.
I think sexy people are sexy. They can wear, you know, like Miley Cyrus has a mullet now.
Yeah, I know.
She'd look good with anything.
Sexy people are just sexy.
Yeah, they make things cool, and they convince unsexy people like me that I can pull it off, and then...
Isn't sexiness subjective?
Yeah.
It must be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so.
I mean, there's some science behind what people find attractive, but maybe we won't go into that now.
I'm curious.
Just in terms of like symmetry.
Oh, okay. But okay, well, who dictates that symmetry then? Is it because of all the images that are created in magazines in the fashion industry and media?
Yeah.
Why is symmetry sexy? Ooh. And is it biological? Like, does it tap into something biological when we want to procreate? That we look
I
for
don't know
symmetry?
to that extent, but there has been, research that like people will generally perceive people with symmetrical faces, and that's like a scientific thing, like the maths can determine symmetry. People will perceive people with symmetrical faces as more attractive, but obviously...
Attractive as in they want to procreate with them?
No, I don't think that's necessarily... Like, I can find people attractive and not want to procreate.
Okay.
Would you say the same?
Oh.
Or do you want to procreate with everyone that you find attractive?
I told you you're not allowed to ask me questions. I'm just kidding. You can ask me a question.
But obviously, you know,
I don't know.
media plays a huge role in determining beauty standards, which, yeah.
No, that sucks. But I'm just thinking, I wonder if it is a biological thing ultimately. I'm not saying we want to procreate with everyone you find attractive. But why are we attracted to people?
I don't know.
You know, like,
I think
why do we become attracted to them? Is it because, I mean, ultimately, is it because they're a potential person you want to procreate with, or not, or just be in love with?
I think there's it's very subjective. Like there's probably an element of biology, and there's also a strong element of like the environment that you grew up in and what's, you know, we're being told is beautiful and attractive, but also, you know, what you want in a partner, whether it's, you know, the physical attractive elements or like their actual personality.
What are you more attracted to, personality or physical, like appearance?
Definitely personality. I mean, you have to obviously have some element of physical attraction for like a romantic or sexual partner, but I think for me, having a good personality increases your attraction or my attraction to you.
I think that's pretty innate for most people. It's good. Sorry.
What about you?
No
You told me
questions.
I could ask questions.
Oh, okay. Let's be straight up. Like, I'm definitely personality, but as a younger man, you know, it was maybe not personality. It was just had to be the physical appearance and attract, and it had to be that was maybe first.
That's the number one thing.
And I still think that is necessary for sure. But I guess if it's, you know, when you really want to live this life in conjunction with another human and experience this, whatever this is together, you want someone that you can connect with emotionally and you know, personally, and have good conversations with. And I think that is so fundamental, because really I think people are just so none of us want to be lonely.
Yeah.
And you'd see that with Lifeline. I think so much of it must come down to like sheer loneliness.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, it depends on what you're wanting as well. If it's just like a one night stand, or, you know, something more casual, or, you know, a long-term partner where ultimately looks do fade. So you probably want someone that you can have a chat with. But yeah, people are lonely.
I didn't think we were going to start talking about this.
We've just had another, like, how long? 10 minutes after the end of the podcast.
There's no set time, but yeah, I don't know, it gets you thinking really. Yeah, we don't want to be lonely.
Go check on your mates and your family.
Is that where you want to end on?
Yeah, sure.
Have I forgotten to do anything else? We've done Come With a Cause. I'm so tired today.
You've done the Indosol.
I've done the Indosol thing. Oh yeah, you want a bed, don't you? Yeah. I think that's it, Manny. You're the best. You know what? Your episode. Oh, I forgot to give you a sticker. Oh. So you get the sticker. You got two of them now. Let me get out of my bag of tricks. I only give these to the people that have been on the podcast. But the problem I've got is that I've been doing a lot of remote podcasts with people in America and other parts of the world, and I've got to send them to them. But who uses the post these days? You know. So you get the sticker. Stick it wisely. And thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me again.
And I think we'll call it out. It's a beautiful Saturday here in Australia. I can't get it out of my bag anyway.
Yeah.
You get the sticker.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, let's go. Yoo.